This time on Psychic Investigators. A young woman vanishes without a word.
In the back of my mind, she was hitchhiking and somebody had gotten a hold of her.
The police think she's run away, but a psychic sees murder.
I feel it was a crime of passion.
The case goes cold for almost 30 years.
We thought that, something more could be done on the case. Let's take another look at it and see where it goes.
But can a psychic's visions crack a cold case from so long ago?
You really can't expect somebody that's been lying for 25 years to all of a sudden say, I did it.
Los Altos, California, in the foothills of the Santa Cruz Mountains. Once known for its orchards, by the late 1970s, it's become a bedroom community for Bay Area commuters.
It was a very quiet, calming place. It was affluent as it is today. The people who lived here cared greatly about their community.
Los Altos is a safe haven, a good place to raise a family, or so it seemed. On March 28, 1978, 17-year-old Laura Ann Byerly, a student at Los Altos High, vanishes without a trace. When she doesn't come home that night, her parents file a missing persons report. Police quickly decide Laura has run away, with good reason.
She had run away at least 6 times, and she had had problems with her parents. She would run away, she would disappear. She had been gone for several weeks, and then she would reappear, come back home. She'd always keep in contact with her friends, and then, come back into the household to make amends with her mom.
Mary Cressy has been Laura's best friend since the 8th grade.
Every time that she ran away, I was always the first person she'd go to. She ran away, but she always came right back.
Her parents, Erwin and Betty Byerly, are sure that this time she hasn't run away. Recently, she's been turning her life around.
She was rebuilding her relationship with her parents. She had decent friends and wanted to change.
But the police are certain that Laura has taken off, and her friends are hiding it.
So you guys saw her yesterday, and if you guys have seen her, you know her.
They questioned us about last time we had seen Laura. And they said, well, has she contacted you? And I said, no. I was like a sister to Laura. We stuck together through everything. We would take her parents' station wagon out, and we'd unhook the speedometer so they wouldn't know we were going somewhere. We would say we'd be in town going shopping, but actually we'd hit Santa Cruz. She was just a social butterfly. She trusted people.
At the Byerly's insistence, police proceed with a routine missing persons investigation. They discover that the day she disappeared, Laura broke up with one young man, Scott Schultz, and made a date with another, John McFoland.
The day she had disappeared, she had gone to school that morning. She had the same class as this John McFoland in the morning. 2 witnesses say they saw her leaving, going into the parking lot area. She did not go to her second period class. She was never seen again.
The police question Laura's ex, Scott Schultz.
He tells the police that he was home and he never saw Laura. He thought she was going to hitchhike over to the house.
The police have no reason to doubt Scott Schultz. Laura is known to hitchhike. With no witnesses and no evidence of foul play, the investigation winds down. But there's still no sign of Laura, and her mother won't give up.
She didn't know why she would run away. She didn't know why she just disappeared. She had no idea what happened.
Betty felt in her heart something had gone wrong. I was the one that suggested to hire a psychic, and that's where Annette Martin came in.
Annette Martin is a well-respected California psychic who's helped to solve crimes for law enforcement agencies across the country, including the FBI. 10 days after her daughter's disappearance, Betty Byerly visits the psychic and provides her with a photograph of Laura.
I close my eyes and I take a couple of deep breaths, and immediately I begin to receive impressions from that photograph. Laura did not run away at all. The police are wrong.
Then, the psychic says something no mother wants to hear.
The most difficult thing in the world is to tell a mother that her child is dead.
"17-year-old Laura Byerly has gone missing from her Los Altos home. Desperate to find her daughter, Betty Byerly has met with a psychic. What she tells her is devastating.
You mean my daughter's dead?
It feels that way.
Oh my God.
It feels that way.
Oh my God.
I'm not getting any impulses of life here. She's very cold. She's very cold to me.
Then the psychic offers another striking revelation. She names the killer.
I saw a name, and the name was Scott. She goes, "That's her boyfriend." Then I saw that he had taken her to this place that was in the woods, and saw him driving down towards Santa Cruz. They were arguing and fighting. I saw him shaking her. I feel it was a crime of passion. And then I saw him bury her in a very shallow grave. Betty was in a state of shock. I had said that the police would not find her body, but I saw a hiker finding her body. And I said to Betty, have they spoken to this Scott? And she said, yes, they have.
Betty clings to the hope the psychic is wrong. But in her heart, she believes Laura is dead, murdered by her boyfriend, and buried in the Santa Cruz Mountains.
I remember sitting in her mom's living room and crying our eyes out together, going, no, it can't happen. It can't happen to her only daughter.
Laura's mother turns the tape over to the police and begs them to look more closely at Scott Schultz. She tells them that Laura and Scott have been dating for 6 months, that he's bad news, controlling and possessive, a dropout who's going nowhere.
With Scott, she seemed to be a different person. She would sit there and would clam up. I felt in my heart that she was almost afraid of him.
But Laura was moving away from her boyfriend. The morning she disappeared, she broke up with him in a long phone call Laura's mother describes to police.
The phone call started about 1:40 in the morning, and they talked for 4 hours. According to Laura, they talk about their relationship, how she's, no longer wants a relationship with him. He's very emotional. He cries on the phone several times related to them breaking up, and that she's going in a different direction.
Come on, Laura. I want to see you again.
In the morning, she notices that Laura's crying, and Laura tells her, hey, I just broke up with Scott. I broke up with him on the phone. I feel bad that I didn't do it in person. And the mom just tells her, hey, don't worry about it. Just go to school, things will get better.
It's the last time Betty Byerly sees her daughter alive. Despite the psychic's suspicions, the police still have nothing to link Scott to Laura's disappearance. The police have nothing on him and no reason to believe Laura has been murdered. However, they search a small section of the mountains where the psychic says Laura will be found. But they find nothing. Police set the case aside. Weeks and months go by with no news. Then, more than a year after Laura vanished, hikers in the Big Basin State Park make a grisly find.
April 1979, some hikers in the Santa Cruz Mountains going along a trail, their dog goes off to the side, and he brings out what appears to be a bone. The people kind of look at it, and then they discover that, hey, this is a human mandible. They also find some clothing and some other items, and they gather all these items. So they go alert the ranger who then calls the police department, and they recognize it as a crime scene.
The Santa Cruz County coroner concludes the young woman has been dead for at least a year. Her name is Laura Byerly. The police contact Mary Cressy, now living in Salem, Oregon.
They said that they'd like to fly in and interview me, and they would like to have me look at some items that belonged to Laura. I had to do this because her dad had died 6 months after Laura disappeared, and I don't think that her mom was able to handle the pressure. I had to identify her shoes. I had to identify her black polyester pants, and I had to identify her sheer flower top. That's all that was left. Her jewelry wasn't there, and Laura always wore jewelry. So I thought that was quite odd.
The Santa Cruz police join with Los Altos to investigate what is now considered a homicide. They re-interview witnesses, including Scott Schultz, but uncover no new leads.
The Los Altos detective re-interviews Scott at that time. In fact, at this time, it's the most thorough interview of Scott done by the Los Altos Police Department. But he's really never really taken on as a major suspect in this case. They can't tie him to the crime scene. They can't tie him to her disappearance. He's just kind of a player that really has never been identified. As far as they're concerned, she was a runaway.
Again, the case goes cold. In 1996, Betty Byerly dies in a house fire. With both her parents dead, it seems Laura's memory is dying too. But in 2005, nearly 30 years after she vanished, cold case investigator Detective Michael Shembry gets a call from Laura's old friend, Mary Cressy.
It was always in the back of my mind that there had to be an answer to this. And I said, you need to pursue it. You need to keep after them, and you need to make sure that this does not get closed again.
She felt at the time, in 1978, that the police department really hadn't done a thorough investigation. And she thought that if we reopened the case and started contacting people, maybe something could be done. And especially in this case, because there was really no family members alive, and there was really nobody else that was, kind of holding a torch to get this thing done. We read it, and we thought that, something more could be done on the case. Let's take another look at it and see where it goes.
One detail in Laura's file that catches the detective's eye is a reference to psychic Annette Martin. But the tape of the psychic's reading is missing.
Mike Shembry called me on the phone and said to me, I was just wondering if you would possibly have a copy of that tape. And I said, yes. I keep a copy of every single murder case.
A lot of these old cases, you'll find that the family has made contact with a psychic. It's not uncommon. If somebody has this ability, that's great. And in this case, it's been open for 25 years. It's certainly not going to hurt. Annette had specific information about the location of the body and what took place. And that information given at that time was not that far off base.
The psychic had predicted Laura's murder and how her body would be found. But will her visions help the police track the killer? It's been nearly 30 years since the remains of 17-year-old Laura Byerly were found in the Santa Cruz Mountains. Her killer has never been found. Cold case investigator Michael Shembry listens to the long-lost tape of a psychic reading.
Scott definitely has something to do with her disappearance. He's very sick.
In it, the psychic zeroes in on the boyfriend, Scott Schultz, who police eliminated as a suspect all those years ago.
So I wanted to talk to her to see if there was any other information or any other feelings that maybe I could take a look at or would point me in a direction where I would get other evidence that would really help in this case. When you're listening to a psychic statement and you're reading the psychic statement, you're still a police officer. So you know that you're just taking this information and you're gonna take it and see if you can do anything with it. Will it provide me a witness? Will it give me a better look at the crime scene? Will it show me a different location where they could have been earlier? Or give me something that I didn't have before? So that's how I looked at her information. Because you realize this information is not admissible in court. You can't walk into court and say, the psychic said that Scott Schultz killed her, so therefore we rest our case.
The deeper Shembry digs, the more his suspicions match the psychic's.
There were several facts that just didn't make any sense. The fact that she had talked to him that morning for 4 hours. She had gone to school and she had made a date in her first period class with her new boyfriend, John McFolin. Then she had a hair appointment later on at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. To me, a young lady that had just made a date with her new boyfriend, that had a hair appointment, she wouldn't run away. She wouldn't disappear unless something specifically happened to her.
Shembry tracks down Scott Schultz, now 46, and a mechanic in Loveland, Colorado. Before interviewing Scott, the detective talks to Cheryl Schultz, his ex-wife. The story she tells him only serves to heighten his suspicions.
She talks about an incident in 1990 where she is going through his items. She finds this box in the back of one of his dressers. And inside the box, she finds this article about this girl that has disappeared and the bones being found in the Santa Cruz Mountains. She also finds a ring and she finds a couple other items. And she kind of wonders, who is this? He's never talked to me about this, but obviously it's pretty important because he's kept the article. Eventually she asks him about this and he just kind of blows it off, just saying it was an ex-girlfriend. So you have that information, it's like, why would he keep these items?
Re-interviewing everyone who gave statements originally finally pays off. A woman who was a friend of Scott's reveals to Shembry that 30 years ago, Scott's uncle owned a weekend home 8 miles from where Laura's body was found. Scott knew the area well.
When I saw that he had an uncle that lived on China Grade, then I knew I could tie him to the crime scene. And once I knew I could tie him to the crime scene, then I knew this case was over with. All I had to do was build it up. All I had to do was get the circumstantial evidence that would put it all together, and that would give you enough probable cause to arrest this guy.
The 4-hour phone call, the box of mementos, now the connection to the crime scene. The detective has enough for a warrant. August 23, 2006. Shembry searches Scott's Colorado home. He discovers Laura's rings, her photograph, and a news clipping. Crucial evidence. Shembry gives psychic Annette Martin a call.
Michael Shembry told me that he was going the next day to Colorado to arrest Scott. And I said, oh, wonderful. Finally, we're going to have closure on this case.
Scott Schultz is arrested for the first-degree murder of his high school girlfriend, almost 3 decades earlier.
They called me up and said that they had just arrested Scott Schultz for the murder of Laura Byerly. I'll never forget it. And I just burst out in tears and said, finally.
Brian Welsh is the DA who prosecuted the case.
This really was a classic case of all the circumstantial evidence, when looked at in its entirety, pointed to Scott Schultz and his guilt. But he had steadfastly denied killing Laura when he had been interviewed on a number of occasions by the investigators.
Scott Schultz is extradited to California, where he pleads no contest to a reduced charge of voluntary manslaughter.
Voluntary manslaughter in this case is referred to as a heat of passion crime. Under California law, a person can plead either guilty or no contest. In this case, he pled no contest. At the time he entered the plea, the court informed him that a no contest plea would be treated as a guilty plea.
By pleading no contest, Scott Schultz avoids the uncertain outcome of a jury trial, and the full details of how Laura died are never revealed. But the cold case investigator's best guess is that she and Scott argued, emotions ran high, and Scott killed her in a fit of rage, just as the psychic visualized all those years ago.
Some people have the ability to see things. I mean, as you get older, there's a lot of things that you really firmly disbelieve when you were younger, that as you get older, you say, you know what, maybe that's possible.
Because he was a minor at the time, Scott Schultz is sentenced to just 2 years in prison.
I was saddened. Here, my best friend's gone, and all he got was 2 years. Where's justice? I feel in my heart that justice will be done, and he will eventually have to pay the price fully.
One thing is certain. Without the psychic insights of Annette Martin and the dogged determination of a cold case detective, the murder of Laura Ann Byerly may have remained unsolved forever. This time on Psychic Investigators, a swimming instructor is found stabbed to death in a quiet Florida town.
Someone couldn't have walked out of there that wasn't covered with blood.
But the case is going nowhere, fast.
There was no physical evidence to arrest him.
Until a psychic claims to see the killer.
It's just a disgusting crime of extreme terror.
But are his visions enough to crack the case?
He says, the killer's nearby, the killer's nearby.
(1977), Boynton Beach, Florida, an hour north of Miami. A quiet coastal town where people escape the troubles of everyday life. Violent crime generally happens someplace else. It's August, and Mae Wentz, a part-time swimming instructor, has run into trouble with her neighbors. Mae, unmarried and living alone, has a habit of leaving her door open for her beloved German Shepherd, Duke.
She would let her dog run loose, and it became a problem with the town. And neighbors complaining about dumping garbage cans and so forth.
By August 5th, her neighbors are so fed up, they report the dog. Duke is caught and taken to the pound. Days go by, and neighbors expect to see Mae looking for her dog, but there's no sign of her. Duke has been left stranded. Finally, on Sunday, August 7th, a worried neighbor checks in and smells a strange odor coming from the bedroom and immediately calls the police.
Mae Wentz was lying on the floor next to the bed. She had been stabbed.
Sergeant John DiBattista was the first on the scene.
There was a lot of blood all over the bedroom, on the walls, on the bed, on the floor.
Lieutenant Ed Hillary is the lead investigator in the case.
There were 2 pieces of a knife at the crime scene. One was the point of the knife, and then one was a broken part of the blade. We never found the handle.
Aside from this, the killer has left little evidence.
We were able to lift several latent fingerprints, but they were subsequently identified as belonging to May Wentz.
From the state of decomposition, police determine how long May Wentz has been dead.
We had a possible time span of when the crime occurred, and that was 2 to 3 days.
But this only makes things harder for the police. It's the first 48 hours that are the most crucial in any murder investigation, and those hours are gone. Adding to the mystery, nothing in the house seems misplaced, ruling out robbery as a motive. And the autopsy later confirms that there was no sexual assault. Her only enemies, it seems, are feuding neighbors.
We had no reports of cars leaving the area quickly or anything like that, so we had the feeling, with the blood all over the walls, someone couldn't have walked out of there that wasn't covered with blood. If they went any distance, possibly someone would see them. We figured it was somebody nearby.
With little evidence, the detectives have their work cut out for them. The police contact May's family in New Jersey with the news.
I was shocked. There were all kinds of questions running through your mind that, what could have happened? Who could have done this?
The very concept that there might be someone out there randomly attacking women is always alarming to the community.
Laura Belgrave covered the story for the local paper.
I think the community felt fear and something of an anxiety for it to be solved. It was a woman brutally murdered in the kind of fashion that in particular scares all women. And because no one knew who the killer was, you have to worry, is there some crazy out there? Is this someone who could break into my house? She was just an everyday person.
Over the next few days, the police learned more about the 41-year-old swimming instructor.
May was a kind and gentle and quiet person. She had a lot to give to people. She was very active with her swimming lessons. I would go up maybe every few weeks, and we'd go out water skiing or just go down to the beach. It was good times.
As the police dig deeper, the mystery widens.
You ask 10 different people about May Wentz, and they'll give you 10 different answers.
She didn't get along very well with neighbors. Not to the extent that, there was altercations or anything like that, but a lot of verbal stuff back and forth. They'd get a lead, and they'd say, this is it, we're gonna, and it would peter out. It was difficult. It could have been anybody.
But 2 neighbors do stand out from the crowd. Brothers Darris and Jerry Mills both have a long history with local law enforcement. They live directly across the street from May Wentz.
They had been involved with Boynton Beach Police Department on several different occasions. Drunken, disorderly, fighting, and things like that.
With no other leads, police decide to check them out. Detective DiBattista conducts a voice stress analysis, a test similar to a lie detector. It measures psychophysiological stress responses in the human voice.
The voice stress analysis that I performed on Jerry, I asked him several questions, and he showed deception, he showed stress on several of the controlled questions. And it was my opinion that he had knowledge of the homicide. As far as Darris Mills goes, he didn't show deception.
Based on the interviews, Detective DiBattista suspects Jerry Mills knows more than he's saying, but his hands are tied.
There was no physical evidence in which to arrest him.
All you got was sort of a floating, well, that week I might have done this or I might have done that. I was drunk, I got in a fight. That's the kind of stuff you'd get from them, but nothing you could pin them down with as to where they were.
Weeks go by, and the May Wentz case is slowly going cold. By a strange twist of fate, the National Enquirer is holding a psychic demonstration in Boynton Beach. The chief of police has been invited, but he tells Detective Ed Hillary to go in his place.
I said, you got to be kidding. I said, you want me to go see a spoon twister? He says, yeah, I want you to go up there for me because I promised him I'd be there.
Before Ed left, I said, Ed, why don't you talk to the psychic? Maybe we can get him to take a look at the May Wentz case. Ed wasn't very happy when I asked him about that, using black magic to solve homicides. But we had no physical evidence to go on. You know, it had worked in the past. Let's try it.
At the demonstration, Detective Hillary meets with well-known psychic Phil Jordan and learns he's also deputy sheriff in his hometown of Ithaca, New York.
My psychic insights with police investigation are to perceive impressions about a crime that ordinary investigation has not been able to come up with.
The fact that he had been used to find people that were lost, find bodies, that impressed me.
The detective invites Phil Jordan to the station to look into the case. But will his psychic insights help to solve the brutal murder of May Wentz?
She's trying to fight. There's blood spattering all over.
41-year-old May Wentz is found stabbed to death in her Boynton Beach, Florida home. 4 weeks have passed. The killer is still at large. With no hard evidence and dwindling leads, detectives turn to psychic Phil Jordan for help.
And I had all the files here to give me. He said, no, I don't want to touch that. I don't want to know anything about the file. Just give me a picture.
As I looked at the picture of May Wentz, I began to perceive a lot of different things. I felt her to be a very independent woman. I felt she was a good person, but very much an individual, very much to herself. I see that she's a twin. I see a pink house. I began to sense things about the murder itself. And I see them violently stabbing May Wentz.
Phil Jordan is dead right about the way May Wentz died.
From not knowing anything about it, told us that she was stabbed. It was pretty amazing.
Even more astounding, May did have a twin, her sister Loretta.
The fact that he knew that there was a twin before we did certainly impressed me.
The police are also intrigued at the mention of a pink house.
They took me to the scene of the crime. They told me that this was the house the crime occurred in, and I was taken back a bit because I perceived the house to be pink in color.
As it turns out, the house was pink.
We noticed right away that the house was a different color because the owner of the house had repainted it after it was cleaned up, and I guess he was getting ready to try and rent it or sell it.
I immediately felt I had to go in the house because I believed that's where the crime did occur. I had an eerie feeling about the bedroom. I stood in the doorway and I began to sense things. I see a person. I see him coming into the house. I see that he's wearing a brown uniform. I see May Wentz. And I see the crime beginning to be created. She's trying to fight. She was aware of who was doing it. And I see him stabbing her with a knife. Her body's being punctured with that knife. There's blood spattering all over. You actually feel the knife penetrating your own being where it penetrated her being. And then as the chaos continued, I realized that the tip of the knife was broken off. It hit a part of her body or a bone that broke the tip of the knife right off. Then I feel the need to get out of there. Something's drawing me to the outside. The person that committed this crime was close.
Phil walked across the street, and he stopped.
It's almost like a suffocating feeling. A fear or paranoia overcomes you.
He says, my God, the killer's nearby, the killer's nearby.
And he's looking right at the Mills brothers' house. That really got me.
Now I'm becoming a believer because we never told him that the Mills residence was where we had suspects. It was kind of creepy.
The psychic's revelations seem to confirm what the police already suspect, that one of the Mills brothers killed May Wentz. But where is the rest of the broken knife?
I immediately asked myself, where would the handle of the knife be? The thing that kept coming to me was under a boat, under a boat. Where is the boat? The boat is where the perpetrator of the crime lives.
John and I both looked in the backyard looking for this boat.
But they find nothing. Phil Jordan returns to New York, leaving the police to figure out the meaning of the brown uniform and the boat.
Driving back in the car, John and I were looking at each other and say, this guy's on point with things. Let's tell the guys that we possibly should be looking for someone in a brown uniform, maybe a delivery guy. Find out if we can develop any suspects in the area.
Intrigued by the psychic's vision of a boat, the detective has an idea.
John says, you know what we're going to do? We have to look at those aerial photographs.
As far as aerial photographs, that's a standard operating procedure for any homicide. For the crime scene investigator to go up and take aerial photographs of the neighborhood. We went back to headquarters. First thing we did is we checked the photographs, and we found a boat.
Phil Jordan was right. There was a boat at the Mills residence. Could this be where the murder weapon was thrown on the night of the crime?
On the day the photographs were taken, that was just shortly after the event. When Phil came, there was no boat behind the house. It had been moved.
Although the police now have evidence that there was a boat, they can't get a search warrant on the word of a psychic.
We had no reason to go on the Mills property because, he needed probable cause, and we had no probable cause.
But now, there's another twist.
Investigation brought to light that Darris Mills worked for a landscaping company that wore brown uniforms.
Is this the brown uniform that Phil Jordan claimed to see? Prompted by the psychic's remarkable visions, May Wentz's neighbor, Darris Mills, is now the prime suspect. But without any concrete evidence, how can the police prove he is the killer? A small Florida town is gripped in fear when a swimming instructor is brutally murdered in her home. With the help of psychic Phil Jordan, police now have a prime suspect in their sights, but they can do nothing.
In any murder investigation, you're going to have to be able to tie the victim and the perpetrator together. You got to have some physical evidence or eyewitness or something.
It's very frustrating that you can't make an arrest. When you know deep down that somebody committed the crime.
Sergeant DeBattista and I were particularly bummed out by this because we had a perfect record. It was a thing of pride also for us. And we were working real hard on it. That's the part that hurt, was we wanted to continue that record. We wanted to get this bad guy off the streets, and we just couldn't get it done.
The detectives believe Darris Mills is the killer, but with no proof, the case slowly goes cold.
The investigation continued for several months till everything just sort of ran out. It was looked at less and less and less. Over 3 years, it had petered out to the point where it was a cold case until it just went away. But it didn't go away in our minds, I'll tell you that.
The community really wanted an end and a resolution to the May Wentz case. There was a loss that shouldn't have been, And when you go and you see a neighborhood where this has taken place, for example, it's changed somehow. It's almost in the air.
May's family continues to pressure the police for answers.
As a family member, you don't want the police to stop. You want them to spend every minute of the day on solving that crime. If this happened again, who would be to blame?
Over the years, psychic Phil Jordan stays in touch with detectives from his home in Ithaca, New York.
Though the investigation is cold, the psychic impressions are the same whether they would be 3 years or 23 years. You become so involved in the case that you actually feel a part of the case. And I was sure that Darris Mills was the person involved with the crime.
But the case gathers dust on the shelf for 3.5 years, until the police unexpectedly catch a break. On March 9th, 1981, Darris Mills is brought in on burglary charges. Police call Phil Jordan to let him know.
When I have a case where we have somebody in custody, I would either do prayers that they would turn themselves in or confess to the crime. That doesn't always have to be verbally done. That can be done just through concentrated effort and thought.
Darris was incarcerated in the county jail. In the middle of the night, he woke up screaming and hollering. The jailer went to him. He said, "I killed a woman in Boynton Beach." He said, "I killed her. I killed May Wentz."
Darris Mills tells police that voices in his head urged him to confess to May Wentz's murder. On the night of August 3rd, 1977, Darris Mills says he went to May's house looking for sex. He claimed they had a one-night stand a few years earlier. Since she always left her door open for the dog, Darris had easy access to the house. He had a knife. He woke her up. They started to fight. Darris choked her and stabbed her until the knife broke. He then fled the house with the handle and threw it in his backyard.
Some of the stuff he said is just tremendous. No question about it. It was on point.
The fact that the knife had been thrown by a boat, and the fact that he knew the gentleman had a brown uniform, he lived in the neighborhood close by. I mean, these weren't things that he was just kind of guessing at.
Darris Mills is convicted on second-degree murder charges. He is later diagnosed with schizophrenia. But could the voices that prompted Darris Mills to confess be something else?
For me, the power of prayer is one of the strongest energies and strongest powers in the world. And I like to believe that that does have strong significance. And I believe in this case it did.
You almost have to believe in psychic power. You know, it really can't be denied.
You know, I'm not going to rule anything out. Apparently it worked.
Some people believe that psychics are fakes or phonies, but I believe that some people do have a gift or a power to be able to foresee things or visualize things.
Whatever prompted Darris to confess, the killer is now behind bars.
Nothing's worse for an investigator than to leave an open case. I was very relieved.
That made us feel good. Bad guy zero. That's the way we felt. Having interfaced with a psychic, I was impressed. As a chief, would I talk to my investigator who's hit the wall? Yeah, I'd tell him to try a psychic.
It works. If they can help you solve a case, I think it's well worth trying.
May Wentz's family can finally begin to find closure.
It puts a spot in your heart. You've lost something that's not going to come back, but maybe the process of this being over with can begin.
Grief stops our life. In a tragic death such as May Wentz, it's hard to continue from beyond that point, especially if there's unanswered questions.
This time on Psychic Investigators, a young mother vanishes.
Send me a sign. Where are you?
And the police can't find her.
No leads came, nothing.
Until a psychic tunes into her spirit.
Little blips of things that were coming through.
And claims to see what no one else can.
Could feel her getting dizzy, heart fluttering.
But are his visions too late?
I didn't feel she was alive.
Is the damage already done?
Wasn't adding up.
People involved, they got away with something.
In the shadow of New York City sits Sayreville, New Jersey. Once an industrial powerhouse, by 1996, a bedroom community. Not only do commuters cross the bridge from the big city, but drugs and the damage they do also make their way to Sayreville. On June 1st, 22-year-old single mom Nicole Arokas heads out for a night on the town with friends. The former NYU student lives at home with her parents, leaving her 16-month-old daughter, Dylan, in their care.
She was a good mother. I thought, oh, she's going to be asking me to babysit all the time. And I was just out of all that stuff. And I only had one child, and I didn't want to get back into that. And she didn't. Maybe once a month, she'd ask me to babysit. And always after Dylan was already sleeping at night.
But when Nicole fails to return home that night, her parents know something is very wrong. Recently, Nicole has been hanging out with a bad crowd, with a taste for booze and drugs.
I knew that if she didn't come home and didn't let us know something was wrong, that she couldn't.
The next morning, Nicole's father, Jerry, now deceased, heads straight to the Sayreville police to file a missing persons report. Detective Jim Novak is put in charge of the case.
Parents know if something's really wrong with their child. I said, what do you think? Mr. Arokas came out and said that I think she's dead.
Before you suspect foul play, you try and rule out all of the other common things that normally you find in a missing persons case, especially an adult. There's really no crime to be a missing person.
A description of Nicole and her vehicle, a black 1980 Chevy Malibu, are fed into the National Crime Information computer system.
To see if any other police department in the United States ever had contact with that license plate. And there was no one that ran her license plate, or her car wasn't found somewhere and run by the police.
Jerry Arokas gives Detective Novak details about his daughter. She didn't like to drive her own car, especially at night. And he wasn't too fond of her choice of friends.
He didn't particularly care for her boyfriend, Michael Reed.
Detective Novak knows Mike Reed. Reed is a suspect in a recent string of car burglaries.
I always thought he was the best liar I've ever met. He would lie to me and smile as he did it. It was almost like Charles Manson type thing.
But her father's biggest fear is that his daughter's recent drug habit, heroin, might have something to do with her disappearance. Detectives start by interviewing some of Nicole's friends, Eric Nordling, Todd Connors, and Mike Reed.
Detectives went into the house to check the house for Nicole. Other detectives interviewed the three occupants, Eric, Todd, and Michael.
And everyone denied having any further contact other than seeing Nicole leave that night to go what they called out to several bars to do some drinking.
As we were leaving, Michael called to me. He said, Mr. Novak, I want you to know, I didn't love Nicole. We were only friends. I looked at Detective Sergeant Sprague, and simultaneously, we said to each other, she's dead. And the reason we felt that way is because he used the past tense, and there was no reason at this point to think of Nicole as anything else than in the present. Unless there was.
But what? There's no evidence to back up a feeling. They continue to pursue the missing persons case, contacting local hospitals, checking towing reports, and connecting with state police. 2 days go by, and there is no sign of Nicole or her car.
At this point in the investigation, we had no leads.
Once you don't come home for a number of days and no one hears from you for a number of days, now this person is really maybe not just a missing person on their own account, but maybe in fact some kind of foul play may have occurred here.
I would go out on the back porch every night and just look around and say, just send me a sign, something. Where are you? I know you're out here somewhere.
Desperate for any answers, the family is willing to try anything.
My uncle Walt Werner worked for the Hackensack Police Department, and he suggested a psychic that the police force sometimes used.
Frank St. James lives in New Jersey and has a reputation for finding missing persons.
I'm like a human satellite or something, going anywhere. Little blips of things I could draw in, get real close. Sometimes they come really quick in flashes. It's like looking through their eyes.
But his one rule? No immediate family members in the session. Diane Macaluso, Pat Arokas's best friend, goes in her place.
My husband and I took a tape recorder with us to record the session, and we took a picture of Nicole with us.
And what the picture shows him, no one really wants to hear.
I tell you, I don't have a good feeling about it. She did expire sometime Sunday morning.
Single mother Nicole Arokas of Sayreville, New Jersey has been missing for 3 days. Psychic Frank St. James says she's dead.
She did expire sometime Sunday morning.
Oh, my heart sank when I heard that because I was still hoping that maybe she just went off with friends.
The psychic claims to be picking up images of Nicole from the night she went out with friends.
I pick up some drugs Saturday. The turnpike is off of there on one of those little side roads. She's not moving. She's not too far from home. I do feel something by Thursday.
Is the psychic right? Will they find Nicole by Thursday?
I didn't have hope that she was alive. I knew that when she didn't contact us and didn't come home, I knew it. But I just had to find her.
The Arokas invite the psychic to their home. Maybe here he can get a clearer picture of where their daughter might be. Left alone, he moves through the house. It's in the kitchen where Frank claims to connect with Nicole's spirit.
Nicole started to come through really easy. It looked like I was flying up above, near water, a dirt road, bridges, cattails, or her car in the marsh. One of the wheels was in the water, a feeling of closed in. I felt that if I was standing 25 feet away from where she was, I wouldn't be able to see her. I couldn't see it from the road. The only way is from above.
Nicole's father takes the tape of both psychic sessions to Detective Novak. The investigator is skeptical, but he's also reached a dead end.
I am not so naive to think that just because I don't have this special ability doesn't mean it wasn't given to someone else. No leads came, nothing. And it's not like we sat on our hands. I thought it doesn't hurt. Began checking all the areas that would resemble areas described by the psychic. There was an old railroad bridge, area where it was tall cattails, area where it was marshy land, ponds, lakes. We came up negative.
And then the detective remembers something else the psychic had said.
Have they tried a helicopter in any of those particular areas?
We're only 3 days into the investigation at this point, and I'm going to ask for a helicopter. I felt I was going to meet with the resistance.
But the next day, Novak gets his helicopter. It's Thursday, June the 6th.
One of the pilots asked why we're using the state police helicopter. And I said, well, we're following the leads of a psychic with respect to a missing person. I'm saying to myself, oh, please, God, please let us find something. Because if we don't, I am never going to live this down.
5 minutes later, above a secluded marshy area, very similar to what the psychic visualized, they do spot something.
The pilot asked what type of vehicle we were looking for, and I explained to him it was a black Chevy we were looking for. At that point, he said, I think I see something down in the weeds right along the Raritan Bay. As the helicopter made several circles above it to find a landing spot where we could land the helicopter, you could see that there was, in fact, someone inside the vehicle.
But what they see from the air is not so easy to see on the ground.
Well, it was necessary to land on the beach area because of the tall cattails and the debris. It was a landfill, maybe a mile square, just covered with the cattails. You couldn't see anything. We each went in different directions, and as I approached this one curve, I was surprised because suddenly I saw the car, maybe 25 feet from the curve. The psychic indicated that you could be 25 feet from the car and not see it.
The psychic had also said that he had a bad feeling about Nicole, that she was dead.
Look in and I see the remains of what appeared to be a female. I noticed the position of her body. Car doors were locked. I radioed in the registration, confirmed that it was in fact Nicole's car.
Once we opened the door of the vehicle, she didn't appear to be seated behind the driver's seat, that she happened to be more in the center of the vehicle between the driver's and the passenger side, that the vehicle was still in gear and the ignition wasn't all the way on.
Inside, police find a letter in Nicole's purse, dated June 1st, the night she disappeared.
That appeared to be a semi-suicide note. Yet, there was no evidence that a suicide had occurred here.
I remember being happy that they found her. But it was like I wanted to pass out and I couldn't. I was like halfway, but you know.
My heart just ached for Pat and Jerry and Dylan.
The autopsy finds the cause of death, acute morphine toxicity, a heroin overdose. The county prosecutor rules her death a suicide, but was it?
It didn't make any sense to me that she would do that.
It doesn't add up for the detectives either. First, there's Nicole's letter found in her purse.
The ink on a date was a different color than the body of the letter, and I thought that was strange.
Her mother confirms that Nicole often recorded her feelings, however dark.
Nothing that went through her mind wasn't written down somewhere. Because she was living a dangerous life, and in case something happened, she wanted to make sure that people knew things, especially Dylan.
Then, the location of the car.
And I kept in mind what Nicole's father had told me. She didn't like driving at night, and she would have to drive over discarded railroad ties and roofing material that was discarded in the area. There was no way that Nicole drove herself to this particular location, especially at night. Somebody had to have driven her car there.
And some of the things that really stood out were what wasn't there. No drug paraphernalia, there was no needles, no syringes, other than a ligature on the floor.
And then Detective Novak remembers what the psychic said on the tape. Nicole was not alone when she died.
There's at least 2 or 3 of them. They were there, they know what happened.
There was more to this than a suicide.
"22-year-old Nicole Arokas has been found dead inside her car. abandoned in a secluded New Jersey marsh. It's ruled a suicide, but a psychic says others were involved, and the lead detective thinks so too.
Anyone reading that letter could easily draw the logical conclusion that this was a suicide. However, they didn't have the information that I had. Her boyfriend, on the first day of the investigation, referred to Nicole in the past tense. The position of her body, the fact that the car was locked.
Most families, once a loved one commits suicide, kind of realize after looking back that the signs of suicide were there. They were depressed or they were having some type of problem. The parents were pretty insistent that they didn't believe that Nicole had taken her own life. And if she did in fact do that, then the crime scene would have been totally different. Usually when you die from a heroin overdose, the death is pretty instantaneous to the injection. There isn't time to remove the syringe from the vehicle, clean up the papers, dust off the dashboard, and make the car kind of neat. If you're going to inject yourself, you probably would have the car in park. The vehicle had actually been left in gear. If she had been, say, trying to leave the scene and all of a sudden the overdose kicked in and killed her, then that vehicle would have run out of gas before the police found her. Yet once we put the vehicle in neutral and turned the key on, it started right up. The suicide note was folded up in her pocketbook. You would probably leave it out in the vehicle. So everything that seemed to be a suicide just didn't seem to be adding up.
If she didn't commit suicide, how did she die? Novak suspects Todd Connors, Eric Nordling, and her boyfriend, Mike Reed.
Couldn't imagine why people I suspected would do such a thing to a friend.
For the detectives, there seems to be only one answer.
Under New Jersey law, if you cause someone's death by giving them a narcotic, it's technically a homicide.
I brought in the people involved, got nowhere.
The case is officially closed, but for Novak, it's still open.
Sometimes it's better to take a step back, let the people involved come to the belief that they got away with something, and they begin to talk and tell friends.
Over the next 3 months, his strategy starts to pay off.
Just as much as I was repulsed by what had happened to Nicole, the friends of Eric, Todd, and Mike Reed were just as repulsed because we began getting information through informants with respect to what is being said. Mike Reed shot up Nicole, and she OD'd, and he dumped her out in the landfill.
That information wouldn't have been admissible in court because it's hearsay.
To have any chance of charging Mike Reed, they need confessions from the people who were with Nicole when she died. They keep waiting.
After the call was processed at police headquarters, it was parked outside for the longest period of time. And every time I left police headquarters, I would look over at the car and I would say, "Come on, Nicole, help me out here." I repeated that probably 100 times.
For the next 3 months, the case eats away at the detective until one December night.
I was serving warrants at an apartment complex, totally unrelated to this, and I find this necklace. It was a child's necklace, the name Nicole.
Although it's not Nicole's necklace, the detective sees it as a sign.
And I thought, this is Nicole's response to me. Maybe it's time that I bring these people in and talk to them again.
But Mike Reed is in jail on an unrelated charge. So Novak brings in his friends, Eric Nordling and Todd Connors.
Eric was the first one to go in because we felt he was the weakest link. Sergeant Burns made Eric aware that he was familiar with Eric's family. His family would be disappointed with what they had done with Nicole. At that point, Eric tears up. Eric began to tell.
But Todd Connors admits to nothing.
I just confronted him. I yelled at him. "This is what you do to her? You leave her there and rot?" And he just looked away. We knew he had him. But he said he didn't want to talk anymore.
Novak needs statements from both Connors and Nordling in order to charge Mike Reed with Nicole's death. A few weeks later, he gets his chance. He brings Todd Connors in on a contempt of court warrant from a nearby town. But this time, he ups the ante. Novak brings in an investigator from the county prosecutor's office. She threatens to charge Connors with obstruction if he doesn't talk. It's Connors' last chance, and it works. Todd finally corroborates what Eric Nordling has already admitted, and what the psychic saw 6 months earlier, that Nicole was not alone when she died. According to their statements, around 8 p.m. on June 1st, 1996, Nicole, Todd, Eric, and Mike Reed head out to buy drugs. A half hour later in Perth Amboy, Nicole cashes her welfare check. At 9 p.m. in Newark, Mike Reed buys heroin. At a rest stop off the Garden State Parkway, Eric and Todd shoot up. Mike Reed shoots up Nicole. Todd and Eric fall asleep. When they come to, they're at the landfill, and Nicole is unconscious. Unable to revive her, they panic. But Mike Reed shows them the letter, the one the police initially took as a suicide note. He wipes down the car, removes all the evidence, and locks the doors. All three walk the 2 miles back to Todd Connors' house.
She would have never done that to them. That's what bothered me. Never. Even if she had to be found guilty, she would have never done that.
On December 16, 1996, Michael Reed is charged with the drug-induced death of Nicole Arokas. He pleads guilty and is sentenced to 10 years in prison. Todd Connors and Eric Nordling walk free. Obstruction charges against them are dropped in exchange for their statements.
We had nothing. We found Nicole based on the information supplied to us by the psychic, Frank St. James. And that's it. It's just, I don't see how anyone could dispute it.
I can't explain it, nor would I even attempt to. I would certainly not have a problem with talking to a psychic or talking to the devil himself if it would help us solve some of our unsolved crimes.
I've done hundreds of cases. This was particularly gratifying, I guess, too, and sad at the same time, but I felt I helped the family at least.
Nothing goes right forever. There's no closure. You never see them again. She didn't have a normal funeral. None of it was the same. Everything was messed up.
This time on Psychic Investigators. When a college student vanishes, everyone's looking.
None of her friends had any information, had no idea where Kim Antonakis was.
Then, a psychic sees a twisted plot.
I knew there were men. I knew they were waiting for her. You could feel the ropes.
And says she's in grave danger.
They say she played in a sandbox that she didn't belong in.
Can the psychic help to solve the mystery of what happened to Kim Antonakis?
I knew she was alive, and I knew they had to find her right away.
Brooklyn, New York. In 1995, the borough suffers more than its fair share of the city's long tradition of crime and violence. A place where sometimes innocent people get hurt. It's nearly 4 a.m. on March 1st. After a night out in Manhattan, 20-year-old college student Kim Antonakis drops her friend, Liz Pace, at her apartment in Canarsie. Then drives a few blocks to her own apartment. Later that day, Kim's dad gets a call. Kim is a no-show at her part-time job. It's totally out of character. Tommy Antonakis immediately calls Kim's friends. No one has seen her.
Tommy came into the precinct shortly after not being able to get in contact with his daughter. I think it was about a day. And he had come into the 69th precinct in Canarsie to make a missing persons report.
Generally, the police wait 24 hours to investigate a missing person. But this time, they move fast.
I don't know, something just said, run with this one. I don't have a good feeling about this case.
Detective Phil Turcola is on duty that day.
I reported it to the missing persons squad, and I started to open up a case and investigate this myself.
Pretty and vivacious, Kim is popular and has a wide circle of friends. An only child, her parents are divorced. Her father, a successful businessman, lives close by. Her mother, in Florida.
Kimberly was a sweet girl, but naive. She had a little fire. She was a lot of fun. She was. She had a good way about her. She had a generous heart.
Detective Tricola suggests Tommy check Kim's parking spot for her car.
And then he called me, and he says, I think you need to come here. I found something. Her car was not there, but there was an earring on the garage floor. Don't know if that earring was there, fell out of a car, if she was wearing it, but I realized one person would know if she was wearing it, and that'd be Liz Pace.
Kim's friend Liz Pace confirms Kim was wearing both earrings the previous night.
Now I know that the car was in that garage, Kim was out of the car, and that earring fell off. I knew she was a victim of a crime. There was no doubt in my mind.
The detective's first thought is that Kim may have been carjacked.
I immediately put an alarm out over the NYPD's internal computer system, describing her to be on the lookout. I got in contact with the Aviation Bureau, and I asked them to look at the spots where cars are normally dumped.
Oh, we were out there, nonstop. I guess the adrenaline kicks in. Sleep don't matter.
I live on Long Island. Every night that I left Canarsie, I drive through parts of East New York, which are known auto stripping parts. People steal cars, auto strip them, and dump them. Cars are recovered all the time in certain desolate parts of Brooklyn.
But Detective Tricola finds nothing. Later that day, when Kim's father arrives home, his answering machine is flashing. But there are no messages. Curiously, someone has phoned and hung up twice. The police check morgues and hospitals. Nothing. They speak to Kim's friends and neighbors and to the couple staying at Kim's place, Joshua Torres and April Dedali.
None of her friends had any information, had no idea where Kim Antonakis was.
Two days pass with no sign of Kim. Her mother, Marlene, arrives from Florida. A family friend suggests that Marlene sees psychic Ellie Crystal.
A woman called me, quite hysterical, actually, and she asked for a reading. She had to have it that night. It was an emergency. This was Kim's mom, Marlene, who had called me.
Host of her own local cable show, Crystal calls herself a medium. She says spirits come to her from the bridge outside her window.
I realized after I lived here for a while that it's almost like harmonics. The two end posts are like tuning forks, and the cables represent the harmonics. Spirits seem to be very drawn and attracted to the bridge, and it just kind of became like a dimensional doorway for me.
2 days after Kim's disappearance, her mother Marlene arrives with one of her daughter's friends at Ellie Crystal's Brooklyn apartment.
They showed me a picture. I started seeing images. I knew she was alive, and I knew they had to find her right away.
Kim Antonakis has been missing for 3 days. Brooklyn police suspect foul play, but they have no real leads. Her mother asks a psychic for help. Ellie Crystal says her daughter is alive, but in grave danger. The psychic channels the young woman's spirit and tries to pinpoint her location.
To go into her body is to feel very cold and very chilled. Her whole energy was very weak and fading. I felt she was dehydrated. She has not eaten, and that if somebody didn't find her very soon, she would die.
Ellie Crystal says she can see what the police already suspect, that Kimberly has been abducted.
I feel that she made an attempt to escape, but they got her. So you could feel that, you know, she had been taken as a prisoner. You could feel the ropes. And there was definitely this feeling of being tied up. I also felt that whoever was involved in this abduction knew her very well. I knew they were men. I knew they were waiting for her. This is kids who are getting either back at her or looking to get some money from the family. It was one or the other. Marlene was crying. She started to cry right away. The whole thing was an extremely emotional reading.
Before the session closes, the psychic has one more cryptic clue.
The letter J was a letter that came to me at the time. I saw it as children would write their letter J. It was connected to the person who had taken her. It came as a male and young and Brooklyn.
Marlene promises to pass on the paranormal clues to the police. But first, back at Kim's apartment, friends and family have gathered to listen to the psychic's tape.
I see her
Tied up, abducted, the letter J.
struggling.
Suddenly, Kim's roommate Josh Torres and his friend Julio Negron jump to their feet. They say that they're going out to search for Kim. At 3 that morning, a fire crew responds to a fire in an empty house on 86th Avenue in Woodhaven, Queens. The flames are easily checked. But in the basement, a grim discovery. A half-charred human body. The long hair suggests it's a woman.
There was the remnants of a chair. The body was burnt beyond recognition.
Queens homicide detective Louis Pia was assigned to the case.
She had no shoes on. She was partially bound with her hands behind her back, and her feet were bound with duct tape.
Arson investigators established the fire was set intentionally with gasoline. The coroner's report reveals the woman was burned alive.
We started making calls. We had a body, and we wanted to see if people had reported anybody missing. So we called the missing persons squad. We were told that there was 2 individuals, one of which was a female in the 6-9 precinct who was reported missing a few days earlier by her father.
And that's when the phone rang. And it was Queens. And they had said they had a female deceased, victim of a homicide that fit the description of Kim Antonakis.
A description that includes some unique body art.
Kimberly Antonakis had some very distinctive tattoos on her back, on her leg.
The tattoos. An infinity sign, a scorpion. It's almost certainly Kim Antonakis.
I got Tommy sitting at my desk, and I walked out. I couldn't even look at Tom. I went into another office, and I sat there. My week came to a screeching halt. And my worst fears came true. I just couldn't bring myself to go back out and talk to Tom. But I knew I had to, so I did. And he's like, what's going on? I said, you know, Tom, I said, there's some guys are gonna come in here and talk to you in a couple of minutes. That was it. My case ended. Case closed.
So we took a ride over to the 6-9 precinct. It was very difficult to tell him that we had a body that was burned beyond recognition, and we're going to need dental records to positively confirm that the individual was his daughter.
A missing person case is now a homicide investigation. A 21-year-old New York woman missing for 3 days has been found dead, burned alive. A psychic says the letter J is connected to her killer. When the brutal crime hits the headlines, even jaded New Yorkers are outraged.
Your mind starts playing games. You get angry. You want to look for the people that did it.
They tied her up in this cold basement, totally dark, and just left her there.
Pete Donahue covers the story for the New York Daily News.
It was a very normal neighborhood. I mean, it's not a neighborhood that you would drive through and expect something like this to happen at all. Just, nice, modest, middle-class homes. And the neighbors were shocked that something like this could happen.
Weeks go by. Though the police have several suspects on their radar, they don't have enough evidence for an arrest. The psychic was right about the abduction, about Kim being tied up and close to death. Could she help the police to find the killer?
Tom Antonakis would call on a daily basis, and he would say, listen, guys, if nothing is going on and you have nothing at this point in time, would you go see a psychic? I shouldn't talk for anyone else, but my assumption was that it was all, full of baloney. But I couldn't tell Tom.
Tommy called and he said that Marlene was impressed with the information I had given her and could he come by with 2 police officers? And I said, absolutely, no problem.
On the following Saturday, Tommy, his brother Joey, Detective Pia, and his partner visit Ellie Crystal.
Crystal balls, I don't believe in them. Well, Tommy's motivation was to find out what happened, and whatever it took, whether it took seances or a crystal ball, he would do it to my brother.
One of the policemen, the one sitting closer to me, he asked a lot of questions. This is when Kim started coming to me.
She told us that there were 4 individuals involved in the homicide. She said that she saw the letter J as being the first letter of the names of the individuals involved. She kept seeing the letter J.
The letter J resonates with the police. Joshua Torres, who is temporarily staying with Kim with his wife and baby, is a suspect, as are his friends Jose Negron and Julio Negron, who, despite their names, are not related. Another friend of Torres, Nicholas Libretti, goes by the street name Little J. 4 suspects, 4 men whose names start with J, one of whom was living in Kim's apartment.
What do you look for? Justice? Vengeance? So many things go through your mind.
I mean, this was front-page news. It was shocking and puzzling, and it was very difficult for people to come to grips with what happened. People were petrified. They didn't know, who was walking down their sidewalk in the middle of the night,
Despite the psychic's clues, it seems the police are no closer to closing the murder case. Weeks, then months pass. Then, on September 6, 1995, 6 months after Kim Antonakis disappeared, the police catch a major break. Friends of Joshua Torres, the guy who was temporarily staying at Kim's apartment, say he's been bragging about her murder.
And I got a call from the detective, and he basically said to me, listen, I got this girl and guy in here, and they're alleging that this guy, Joshua Torres, confessing that he burned Kimberly Antonakis, abducted her for a ransom, and so on, and gave all the particulars. From that point on, the investigation started to go full force.
First, the police bring Joshua's friend Julio Negron in for questioning, and he eventually cracks.
We interviewed him at great length, and he actually confessed, and he agreed to cooperate with the district attorney's office. And then from there, we went and we grabbed Joshua and Nick Libretti simultaneously on the same day.
Torres, the roommate, denies everything. But Nick Libretti, faced with Julio Negron's confession, also cracks. Between them, they reveal a kidnapping scheme that went very, very wrong.
All they had to do was just ask. We both would have gave anything to have her back.
Involved were Joshua Torres, Nicholas Libretti, a.k.a. Little J, Julio Negron, and Jose Negron, all J's, just as the psychic predicted.
This was just animals that were fools and they were idiots.
The trial of Joshua Torres, the ringleader, opens on November 1st, 1996. He pleads innocent.
Josh Torres is a particularly twisted and grotesque personality. He's an evil individual.
Gene Reebstein prosecutes the case.
I believe Josh thought she was a good target for a ransom demand because he could tell, one, that she had a lot of resources, and two, that her family cared for her. The way he looked at it there is there's money there and there's affection there. And those are two things Josh knows, well, to get one, he knows how to use the other.
Torres, who already had a criminal record, easily roped his friends into a scheme. The prosecution argues that at approximately 4 a.m. on March 1st, 1995, as Kim Antonakis parked her car in the garage across from her Brooklyn apartment, Nicholas and Jose grabbed her and drove her to a vacant home in Queens. There, they tied her up in the basement with no heat, no food, and no water, and left her for 3 days. Joshua Torres phoned Kim's father twice to play a pre-recorded ransom demand. But, by accident, he played the ransom tape too early for it to be recorded. Later, when Joshua and Julio heard the recording of the psychic session, they panicked, thinking she was onto them. That same night, they drove over to Queens, planning to set Kim free. But after 3 days in the cold without food and water, she was comatose. The cruel, bungling gang assumed she was dead. Joshua decided to burn the evidence.
These guys, Torres and Liberty, had absolutely no remorse. I mean, you got the sense that they just looked like at other people like bugs. You know, they had no feeling, they had no sense of value of life.
The jury hears that just as Joshua Torres lit the fatal match, he whispered to Kim, "Life sucks." Despite the evidence, Joshua denies all the charges, but the jury thinks otherwise.
And Tommy said he didn't want the death penalty for these guys. He wanted them to suffer as long as possible.
And he should rot in jail for the rest of his life, and he should never come out.
Joshua Torres is convicted of arson, kidnapping, and first-degree murder, and sentenced to 58 years. As for Nicholas Libretti, or Little J, he's also sentenced to 58 years, but dies in prison of AIDS less than 2 years later. A year later, in November 1996, Julio Negron is sentenced to 6 years as an accessory because he did nothing to stop the crime. Jose Negron never gets to trial, as in June 1995, he was gunned down on a street in Queens. From the beginning, the psychic seemed to key in so clearly to Kim and her killers.
One of the things from Ellie's reading that I was present at that was astonishing was that she was right on the money with the letter J. I mean, you had Joshua, you had Julio, you had Jose Negron, okay? And you also had an individual that we were looking at in the investigation that was known as Little J.
I think there are psychics out there that are good at what they do. I think they do have that extra sense. It's kind of like an enhanced gut feeling.
The last time I saw Tommy, he told me that everything had been taken care of. There was a feeling with Tommy of completion, that whatever this whole scenario was that involved his daughter's kidnapping and murder and the capturing of the criminals, it had come to a conclusion already. It was over. After that, I knew I wasn't going to see Tommy again.
It was hard after. That was Daddy's little girl. 100%. She had him wrapped. Can't put it any better than that. That was his heart.
Tommy went to Kimberly's grave regularly. I mean, he went there on her birthday. He went there on holidays. He invited me to come after one of the verdicts. And he went and he said, you know, we did it, baby. We got that piece of garbage.
In 2005, 10 years after his daughter's grisly death, Tommy dies of cancer.
I think in the end, he felt he had nothing to live for. He died of a broken heart.
This time on Psychic Investigators. In small-town Maryland, a chicken farmer vanishes.
We have searched the whole county. We couldn't find nothing. And we didn't know what was going on.
It's a mystery, even to the police.
Maybe she was not missing, but had become the victim of foul play.
Until a rookie psychic takes the case.
I said, it feels like something just hit me in the head.
And uncovers a secret no one could imagine. Amid the farmland of Maryland's eastern shore lies the close-knit community of Berlin. In 1991, a sleepy place where family ties run deep, and so do their secrets. July 29th, and 55-year-old chicken farmer Mildred Louise Williams, known to friends and family as Miss Louise, says goodbye to her elderly mother and leaves for her cleaning job in nearby Ocean City. Miss Louise tells her mother she'll be back at noon. She's never seen again. Miss Louise's brother and sister-in-law, Robert and Nettie Moxley, will never forget that day.
When she didn't come home, Granny called Dawn. Dawn said, oh, we'll check around. She's probably gone somewhere running around, Mom. Don't worry about it.
Dawn is Miss Louise's 32-year-old daughter who lives nearby with her son and her husband, Billy. Dawn doesn't seem too worried, but Granny Moxley is. Miss Louise is never late.
If she told you she was going to be there, she was there.
At 7:30 that night, Dawn turns up at the farm with Miss Louise's red truck. She tells her grandmother she found it in the parking lot of the supermarket. Dawn says her mother is probably out drinking, and she doesn't want her driving under the influence. By midnight, there's still no word from the missing woman. Granny Moxley convinces her granddaughter to call the police.
She said, Dawn, if you don't call the cops, I'm calling them. And so Dawn did call the police, but she told them that this is my crazy grandmother. My mother's run off with a man, and my grandmother's just hysterical. It's okay.
The police aren't overly worried either. Miss Louise is a recent widow, fun-loving, and someone who likes to party.
She played. We all do. She loved to drink once in a while.
Everybody remembers parties with her. She was always joking around.
But Miss Louise's siblings believe something is wrong. The day she went missing, a family vacation was planned. And Miss Louise never misses a party.
I know it wasn't like my sister to take off, like that, 2 or 3 days without calling.
2 days after she vanished, the Moxley siblings, Dale, Robert, and Nettie, head to Berlin to see what they can find out about their sister. The first thing they notice is the truck that Dawn drove home from the grocery store.
And the vehicle had just been washed, they say. It was so clean. It said to me something was wrong there.
In Miss Louise's house, another clue that something is not right.
She had a safe in there with a lot of money in it. Safe was open and wasn't no money in it.
News of an empty safe is enough to get the police over to the farm, but not enough to change their mind about Miss Louise.
I was pretty much convinced at that point in time she may have been with someone and been off drinking, so forth.
Trooper Paul Frick worked the missing persons case.
So at the point, we didn't have any reason to believe anything other than the lady was missing due to her own reasons rather than foul play.
But the police do issue a missing persons report across the state. Sergeant Bill Gordy worked the case from nearby Wicomico County.
I was aware of the case. It had gotten quite a bit of notoriety, and we had had a small role in just tracking down leads of potential sightings and that sort of thing.
But every lead comes to nothing. The Moxleys take matters into their own hands.
We called hospitals. We called nursing homes. We walked the woods. I think we have searched the whole county, but we couldn't find nothing. We didn't know what was going on.
It seemed like I wanted to just turn everything upside down just to find her, but you couldn't. You just kept running into dead ends.
Dawn and Billy even appear on television, tearfully asking viewers for any news of Miss Louise.
Please come home or call.
Yeah. I do.
A few days after Miss Louise disappears, her brother Dale Moxley stumbles on a magazine story about Deborah Heinecker, a Maryland psychic. She has been praised for locating Vader, a search and rescue dog gone missing from the Canine Police Unit in Montgomery County. Dale calls the family immediately.
And I just said, maybe this is how we could, get some help here.
Deborah Heinecker, a former computer programmer, is new to the world of psychic investigation.
I can focus on a subject or something that belongs to the victim. That's when I start to get the pictures, or sometimes I will hear sounds. I will allow myself to be the victim so that I can get a better picture of exactly what happened to them in their final moments.
The psychic agrees to come to Berlin, but first, she asks the family to send her a photograph of Miss Louise, along with some of her personal items.
I started to tune in, and the numbers 335 came to me. I saw a white horse. It also came to me that Miss Louise was getting ready to go on some sort of vacation. I clearly saw a building, and I made the angle of the metal roof.
3 days later, when the Moxleys pick up the psychic at the airport, they're not prepared for what she asks them.
I read the numbers and I said, do these numbers mean anything to anyone?
She said 335. My brother-in-law said that's Don's and Billy's address.
When Mildred Miss Louise Williams disappears from her home in Berlin, Maryland, the police suspect she's gone on a bender. But a psychic sees a set of numbers, and that arouses suspicion.
She said 335. That's Don's and Billy's address.
Could Miss Louise's daughter and son-in-law have something to do with her disappearance?
They had got in a fuss 2 weeks before because Louise had told him that she had changed her will.
Dawn and Billy had recently stopped Miss Louise from seeing her grandchild. In retaliation, Miss Louise threatened to disinherit them.
After my sister disappeared, Billy Warren would never look me in the eye. Deep in your hearts, you have a funny feeling.
With Dawn and Billy present, the Moxleys say nothing. But what about her other visions? The vacation?
We planned a family reunion in North Carolina for a week. Every one of the Moxleys were going to meet. We were all going to, go on vacation.
But the white horse and the metal roof are a mystery. The Moxley siblings drive the medium to Billy and Dawn's farm, the very address she saw in her vision.
We went to Dawn and Billy's house, and there was this white horse in the fence right alongside the road near their house. It was spooky.
Still unaware of the siblings' own suspicions, the psychic becomes uneasy as she nears the house. She takes Nettie Moxley aside.
When I had her a bit to herself, I basically said, I'm afraid of Billy, so don't leave me alone with him. And she agreed. I think she had no intention of leaving me alone with him.
They enter the house and go into the kitchen.
When Deborah got to the kitchen, she got a terrible headache. She felt a terrible pain.
I said, it feels like something just hit me in the head.
I think she creeped Billy out. She worried him a lot.
I started feeling as if Billy and Dawn didn't want me in their house. They were being very fidgety, and they were trying to hurry me out. So we go outside, and there's this dirt path. And I said, I want to walk down this little dirt road. The same radar that knew that Vader was in the woods, it was that sort of radar. It just pulls me. And Billy did not want me to go down that road. He said, you don't want to go down there? That place is full of snakes. So that was enough to deter me from going back there.
The psychic's intuition matches the siblings' growing suspicions. They believe Billy and Dawn are hiding something. But what? Deborah Heinecker returns to Catonsville, Maryland, but she's not finished with Miss Louise yet. Over the next few weeks, she continues to experience strange, extrasensory flashes.
I was hearing the buzzsaw, and I felt as if I had been pushed into almost quicksand, like I was being pulled down and the mud was just coming into my mouth, coming into my face, just being covered with mud, and that I was going to drown there. It was very frightening.
A buzzsaw, drowning in mud. Is Deborah Heinecker looking for a missing person or a dead body? Her psychic intuition tells her Miss Louise may have been murdered. She makes a difficult phone call to Nettie Moxley.
I said, I don't want to start trouble in the family, but I said, I felt that perhaps Dawn's husband, Billy, had killed Miss Louise and buried her either in or next to the pond behind their house. Her response was that they believed that also, but they needed me to help them prove it.
But proving it is easier said than done. Billy is an upright, church-going member of the community, not your typical murder suspect.
Mr. Warren had a stable and positive life. He had a nice job, a home, a family.
The Moxley siblings pass along the psychic's unnerving visions to the police, but they fall upon deaf ears. They still believe the most likely scenario is that Miss Louise has run off with a drinking buddy.
I've never believed in psychics. I've never believed in supernatural. I've only ever believed the living are the people that can hurt you, not the dead. People that say they can tell you things that have happened or are going to happen, I just never had much faith in that.
As the weeks pass, the psychic and the Moxleys increasingly think Miss Louise is dead, and Billy is the killer. But without a body or hard evidence, they can't persuade the police to ramp up the investigation.
You can't arrest someone on a whim or what you think happened. You have to be able to prove what you're accusing someone of. If that's the case, as I felt at the time, but couldn't prove anything more, I couldn't in good conscience do anything different than what I was doing. I didn't have enough evidence.
The police won't forge ahead on the word of a psychic, but Miss Louise's family can, and does.
She just made our search even stronger. She made our will stronger. It just gave us extra strength as a family to go search even harder.
3 months after she vanished, the case is given new life. Sergeant Bill Gordy is transferred to the Berlin Police Department from nearby Wicomico County.
My gut told me that there were elements of the investigation that needed to be refocused and that maybe she was not missing but had become the victim of foul play.
In Berlin, Maryland, local chicken farmer Mildred Miss Louise Williams is missing. Her siblings and a psychic suspect her daughter and son-in-law. With a new detective on the case, their suspicions are suddenly taken seriously.
We met with the Moxleys and tried to work out something with them that would be a cooperative type effort in the investigation.
Miss Louise's sister, Nettie Moxley, calls Deborah Heinecker with the news. And detectives drop their earlier skepticism and begin consulting with the psychic regularly by phone.
I view a psychic as much the same as an investigative aid as, say, a polygraph. It can many times put pressure on a person, and since we didn't have a lot of active leads to pursue, it was believed that this might well present one of those situations.
There wasn't a day that went by that I didn't think of Billy and that case, and basically how I was going to get him.
Not only do the psychic and the Moxleys have their sights set on the grieving daughter and son-in-law, now the police start watching Dawn and Billy more carefully.
We did try to ratchet up the attention on him to let him know that we were more closely scrutinizing their current and past statements and behavior.
Billy Warren has been acting strangely, nervous, edgy, short-tempered.
He was just not a cool, calm, collected person.
Finally, the police ask Billy and Dawn to take a polygraph. They agree, and on December 12, 1991, the tests are scheduled.
Billy said Dawn's not going to take the polygraph, and then after just a brief conversation, himself elected not to. He developed a difficulty speaking. He was almost incoherent. He was obviously very frightened, very upset, very unnerved by the entire experience. It was obvious that there was more on his mind than just the refusal of a polygraph test.
I think he knew the door was coming shut on him. The pieces were there. It was only a matter of time.
For the police, refusing to take a polygraph is a red flag. But it's still not enough to make a move.
We had a lot of conjecture. We had a lot of, this doesn't add up, this doesn't look right, but physical evidence to tie him to a crime, zero.
Maybe that physical evidence can be found where the psychic had been telling them all along.
I told the police that I felt that she was in mucky soil, and Billy and Dawn had that pond right back there, and I had been drawn there originally, so I wanted them to go there.
But finally, I asked the investigators that were currently working on the case to go out to Mr. Warren's house.
There, two of the investigators head towards the pond, while Trooper Frick waits outside. Suddenly, the door opens and Billy calls out to him. Billy has something to say.
He just literally fell to pieces in front of me and started confessing.
5 months after she vanished, the terrible mystery of what happened to the chicken farmer is solved. Billy says on July 29th, Miss Louise came over to visit. He was alone. They argued over Dawn's inheritance. Miss Louise threatened to disinherit Dawn once again.
He became enraged. There was a claw hammer there. He had been doing some home repairs. He picked up the hammer and swung it and struck her in the head.
He says she fell, and he tried to get her off the carpet pretty quick. He didn't want her to mess the carpet up.
He buried Miss Louise in the mud next to the pond behind his house, washed her truck, and drove it to the grocery store parking lot.
It was meant to be found as though she was there and left it, like meeting someone.
Later, when the psychic nearly stumbled on Miss Louise's burial spot, Billy panicked, dug his mother-in-law up, dismembered her with a buzzsaw, and reburied her under the floorboards of his woodshed. A woodshed with a slanted metal roof. Billy goes on to say that his wife had no knowledge of the crime. The murder weapon and the body are later recovered, as is evidence of blood spatter in the couple's home, corroborating the confession and the psychic's vision.
Miss Louise evidently had been bludgeoned in their kitchen. And when they pulled up the rug, they found her blood under the rug, exactly where I was standing when I said that I felt that I had been hit in the head.
Billy Warren is sentenced to 20 years in prison for the murder of Mildred Louise Williams. Then, Billy drops a bombshell. He reveals his wife Dawn helped him to cover up the murder. She's charged as an accessory and sentenced to 5 years. In a cruel twist of fate, Dawn receives her mother's inheritance on her release.
She knowed what happened from day one, you know, from the first minute.
You gotta realize you're being torn apart from love and hate. You love someone and they've done something to hurt one of your family members. Now there's hate over here pulling that apart.
It's your mother. I mean, she gave you life. And you can cut her up and put her in the woods and walk out that door and go to church every Sunday morning looking over in those woods and knowing your mother's over there buried.
The police credit Deborah Heinecker with pushing Billy over the edge and into the arms of the law.
I personally believe she played a pivotal role. I would like to think we could have done it without her. However, that's not the case. Her predictions were the key to causing him to confess.
When he confessed, he said that he wasn't afraid of all the Moxleys. He wasn't afraid of the police. He was afraid of me because he knew I was going to get him.
To put it bluntly, I think she's the reason the case was solved. So if someone asked me today what I think of psychics, I'd have to say that I have changed my views completely and I'd listen to a psychic.
Deborah Heinecker also turned the Moxleys into believers.
I thought she was super. As far as I'm concerned, she can walk on water now. It's like she turned the lights on to everything. We were all in the dark till she came along.
I've never believed in psychics. I don't know much about them, but I know that she was right on and she helped us.
I actually felt that justice was going to be served for Miss Louise. I felt that Miss Louise deserved to have that confession.
The Moxleys have never gotten over it.
She was a good friend. If you needed her, she was there. She should have had a peaceful death. I just miss her.